When people used to introduce themselves the first few days during the Stop Smoking Clinic, there were people in the group who would amaze everybody else. There would be people in there who had cancer, who had been going through chemotherapy and horrible, surgeries and radiation and having all these horrible side effects, and be writing off the condition that they had. They knew there was no doubt in their mind was caused by smoking. There'd be people in there who were like laryngectomies, who couldn't talk anymore, who had to, learn to process swallowing and belching up air and talking in this horrible raspy voice that was really hard to hear for many people and hard for these people to do, to learn how to speak in this way, who had no doubt that cigarettes caused their problem. There were people there who had heart attacks and were very limited on what they could do. People who were stroke victims who had, paralysis, and they couldn't do lots of things. And there were people there who were literal amputations because of peripheral vascular diseases from smoking. There were people there on oxygen tanks who were just struggling to just walk to their chair, and then were exhausted just from the process of getting off the elevator and walking into the room. You could just see they couldn't breathe anymore. And all these people openly acknowledging and knowing that cigarettes were causing the condition, or had caused the conditions that they had, and that their continuing smoking was exacerbating all the problems. They were getting worse and worse. And people would look at them who were smokers in the room, but thinking, oh my God, how could these people still be smoking? Working with the assumption that, man, if they ever got to points like that, they would stop. Well, you don't know that they would stop. You don't know that they wouldn't have ended up in the exact same condition. But the question that's raised here is, why could how could these people continue to smoke after all these horrible things that cigarettes have done to them? Well, you got to understand, they know what cigarettes have done. There's no doubt in their mind. They know the cigarettes are making their life, in a sense, get worse and worse. Their conditions get worse and worse. Not their life here, but their conditions that they are dealing with are getting worse and worse. And they continue to smoke, in many cases, because they're still working with the assumption that if they were to quit smoking, their life would be more worthless than it is now, more painful than it is now, causing more limitations than they're experiencing now. And you wonder, well, how could a person think like this? Well, you got to understand why they were smoking to start with, not why they started smoking. They started smoking for, again, peer pressure. They started smoking to look grown up. They started smoking when they were relatively young, when they were relatively healthy, and not believing what cigarettes were going to do. But they continued smoking because they became drug addicts. They had to keep delivering nicotine. And now they have this imagery of what their life will be like if they no longer continue to deliver this nicotine. And that imagery of what they're thinking their life is going to be is what allowed them to smoke to the point that they got the conditions that they're dealing with, and what's allowing them to continue smoking, even though they're dealing with these horrible side effects of smoking. Side effects being, again, life-threatening and crippling conditions. Well, how could they imagine their life being worse? Again, it comes down to why they've continued smoking all this time. People smoke to stave off a drug withdrawal state. A drug withdrawal state that automatically starts in for most of these people within 20 or 30 minutes of their last cigarette, and as soon as they don't have another one, they start to get more and more uncomfortable. And then they start to feel like this is the product which is bringing them relief from all the daily pain and suffering that they've been having, for years and decades prior to the condition, that cigarettes were making their life manageable. Like, when they were nervous, cigarettes calmed them down. And I got whole videos that I'll attach into the description here discussing why that happens. And they're working with the basis that they need the cigarettes for energy. When they start to feel lethargic, if they start to feel headachy, all these little lousy little side effects they start to feel when they don't smoke. And they think cigarettes make you feel better. Well, no. Being a smoker are causing all those side effects. And then being a smoker causes that if they don't deliver, they go into withdrawal. And if they don't take the cigarette under withdrawal, the withdrawal gets worse and worse. And they start to think that their life is going to continually get worse and worse and worse. The longer they go without their cigarettes, the worse it's going to get. And gee, in a matter of days or weeks or a month, their life is going to be terrible. Then you get these people, they have to smoke before they get out of bed. They have to smoke before they get out of bed. They can't function until they smoke a cigarette. Well, if they're thinking that this is the way their life is, well, the day they quit smoking, they're never getting out of bed again. Their life is over. They can't work, they can't socialize, they can't have fun, they can't do the things they need to do because they can't have a cigarette to start the process. If the imagery that they had of what their life would be like after they quit smoking was an accurate imagery, I would have to concur with them that sure, they're better off smoking. The day they quit smoking, their life is over. So sure, what's the difference here? But they're working under a total false premise. The way their life is like after they quit smoking, it's not what it's like the hour they quit or the day they quit. That's what it's like to be a smoker in drug withdrawal. Drug withdrawal is a very temporary state. Get through 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. It varies on how long the withdrawal lasts for individuals, but hey, once they get through 72 hours, it'll start to ease up. In 2 weeks, there's no withdrawal whatsoever. Are there physical symptoms they may be experiencing? Well, there might be. There's some things that can still go on, and many of these things are caused because their body is still adjusting. The amount of sleep that they may need, the way they have to eat. Hey, if they're on medications, those things may need to be adjusted. But once those adjustments occur, and in reality, even before those adjustments occur, their life is probably a lot better than it was while they were smoking and continually, again, trying to stave off this withdrawal, but destroying their lungs and exposing their body to all these toxic chemicals that were causing all these horrible conditions that they were currently experiencing. And these conditions were making the suffering much worse than whatever withdrawal would have been. If they had quit 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, the withdrawal would have been nothing compared to what they've experienced up to this point, and they're continuing to feed the addiction and continuing to exacerbate the destruction. What I always told people was, get yourself off for a couple of weeks. See what it's like not to smoke, and then decide. Hey, if you decide in 2 weeks that your life is terrible, you're miserable, you can't get out of bed, nothing is worth living anymore, it's just not worth it, hey, you've got the option to go back to smoking. You can do that. You'll be making it based on an informed decision of what life is really like. But at the end of 2 weeks, you may also realize you kind of like not smoking. And maybe it's even more than kind of like. Maybe it's really, really great. And you'll realize that this was much better than you ever thought it was going to be, much better than your life has been for a long time, because that's going to happen to more people than not. And once you realize of how much better your life is, and again, how destructive smoking had been up to that point, and you never want to face that kind of destruction again, and that quality of life that cigarettes were taking from you. Once you realize what it's like not to smoke, you realize this is a way of life that you want to sustain. You won't have that fear anymore of, oh, how horrible your life's going to be. Your life isn't that horrible. You see it at that point. And then all you'll need to do to keep this new way of life going, for as long as you decide you want to, is simply stick to the personal commitment now that you hopefully made when you started this process, but now without the fear, because you realize it is a nice way of life, to stick to the personal commitment to never take another puff.